So now I'd like to welcome our first speaker. And if you haven't noticed yet, we've had some great speakers, but we've also had some great friends of mine that have been at this event, which has been nice, comfortable. And I've selected these people not just because they're experts in what they know, just because they're great human beings. So I want to introduce our next speaker, Ferose V R. Ferose and I first met in 2008. I actually did 3 books in the 2000s. The last one was In Pursuit of the Perfect Plant. And Ferose was heading up the labs in India. So I went to a little town named Gurgaon to speak to the SAP folks about the book and I think about building community back in 2008. We've become good friends. Ferose heads up one of his jobs, just like Martin, he has many different activities, is heading the SAP Academy for Engineering. And we'll have a bit of a teaser at the end that will matter a lot to you folks. The thing that really makes a difference in so many people's lives, Ferose was one of the key people that set up the Autism at Work program at SAP. Follow Ferose on LinkedIn. The stuff that he does for people with disabilities is unbelievable. Ferose also has incredible passion for books and bookstores. And he just came out with a recent book on shelf life, all about a book on books. That the artists inside the books, the art inside the books, it's a masterful coffee table book, I would say, is all done by people on the autism spectrum. So without any further ado, I want to welcome my good friend Ferose. And Ferose was actually here in 2020, like you, sitting in the crowd, and he came back 4 years later.
Thank you. Thank you. Isn't Paul just amazing? You all agree? Can you have a round of applause for Paul? I think I call Paul a master broker. You know, he gets people together. He has one of those very rare qualities, which is to make people look way better than what they are. So thank you for that very kind and generous introduction. I'm a huge fan of Paul, because I hope I'll be as relevant as he is at his age. I don't want to disclose his age, but he is... I don't want to tell his age, but he's just 62. But anyway. But I keep telling him, I'm 49, and I'm like, I wish I have the same energy, the same passion that he has. So he's not just a friend, but as I said, he's a role model for many of us. And Rishad said, if you want to be relevant, you have to read every day. You have to invest 1 hour on learning new stuff every day, and that's what Paul does. And that's how we became good friends. Every time we call, we're like, what are you reading? What's your new insight? I'm delighted to be here. I know this is the 3rd day, so many of you are how do you call this? The 3rd day or the 4th day, Paul?
It's kind of 3.5.
3.5 days. So I want to, I have 30 minutes, and I have some slides, but I normally don't show my slides. And I have my slides because I just want to kind of have some pictorial representation of what I'm speaking here. And mostly what happens is I torture my assistant to build great slides, and he spends like a month to build a great presentation, and then he gets pissed off because I never showed it. So I will show my slides mostly at the end, but what I'll do in the next 30 minutes is tell you a story. Is that okay with everybody? Is storytelling good, right? Before I start my story, let me share with you the 2 questions that most of my friends ask me. As I told you, my age, so you know all my friends are in that age group, and they have kids who are teenagers ready to go to college. So the 2 questions they ask me is, Ferose, what should my child study so that he gets a job when he graduates? How many of you have this question in your head? Many of you, right? What should my child study so that he gets a job when he graduates? And every time I give him an answer, I'm always wrong. So I've started to believe that experts are mostly always wrong. But, a few years ago, I said, you know what? The job that is, or the skill that is the most important is coding. Teach your child coding, and he is made for life, because that's one thing that's not going away. And I said that, I think, 2 years ago. And only yesterday, I heard the NVIDIA CEO say, AI has killed coding because everybody is a programmer. So there goes my prediction. So let me start with my story first. So this was in the year 2019. I was on a vacation with my family to Death Valley. I was heading SAP's globalization services, which basically takes every SAP product and localizes for every country. I had a huge engineering team, 1,500 people around the world. I was asked to turn around that, and I'd done that after it took me 6 years. And in the middle of my vacation, my assistant called me and said, Ferose, you have a 15-minute meeting request on your calendar. I just saw it. It is with Christian Klein. Christian Klein at that time was the head of products. He wasn't the CEO yet. And when you get a 15-minute meeting request with a board member, it basically means only two things. Either you're going to get fired or you're going to get a new job. That's it. And I've got many of those 15-minute calls in my career, and I know exactly what to expect. I'm in the middle of Death Valley, and I know the network is only in the hotel where you stay. As you go out, there's no internet connection after that. And so I told my family, bad luck, we have to stay put until I get my phone. Christian called me 30 minutes before. He was on driving his car, and he said, Ferose, how are you doing? How's your family? And I'm like, I'm getting a little nervous now. Board members normally don't start and ask conversations, small talks. So I was like, okay. And he said, Ferose, I'm just coming out of a meeting with Hasso Plattner. And he's basically asked me 3 questions. The first question he asked is, Christian, when are we going to make the next breakthrough product? SAP in the last 10 plus years have grown through acquisitions. We went shopping around, spent $35 billion plus and shopped for a lot of great companies, SuccessFactors, Ariba, Qualtrics, and many others. We have grown through inorganic ways. We have acquired companies, acquired revenues, acquired users. And he said, when are we going to build the next breakthrough product? If you look at the history of SAP, it takes almost 10 years to build the next breakthrough product. We started with R2, then R3, HANA, S4. That's the timeline it takes you to build one breakthrough product. And he said, when are we going to build the next breakthrough product? We may not have the money to do a big acquisition anymore, so we need to build the next breakthrough product organically. So his first question was, SAP was built by engineers. Our founders were engineers. Do we have the engineers to build the next breakthrough product? First question. Second question. Do the best engineers join SAP? Where do they join? Across the world, we have Great Place to Work surveys. SAP is there in hundreds of companies. In different places, SAP is seen differently. In Germany, we are the best employer for engineers, but not necessarily the same across the world. A lot of people say we want to join the FANG companies. Many of them join startups, but are we attracting the best engineers? That was the second question. And the third question, which is more tactical than strategic, he said, SAP has built this incredible SAP Sales Academy. I don't know how many of you know that. This is in San Ramon, been there for almost a decade. What we do is we hire some of the best salespeople, let them go through the academy, and then they end up becoming some of the best salespeople, not just in SAP, but across the world. In fact, there is data to show that the graduates of the Sales Academy actually do 120% of the quota compared to the others who don't. In fact, many of them are in Hawaii this week. So he said, SAP is an engineering company. Why is it that we build the next and the best salespeople, but we have nothing for the engineers? And I've heard this often, that the engineers say this, that if you're a good salespeople and if you meet your numbers and if you exceed the numbers, you go to Hawaii. If you're a good engineer, you get more work. And so I said, Ferose, I need you to come up with a solution for these 3 questions in the next 2 weeks. Come and meet me and give me a 1-hour presentation on what do you think is the way to resolve this. There goes my vacation. I come back. I couldn't say this to anybody except my chief of staff, and he said, we need to work on something. Let's figure out what's the way forward. He didn't tell me go build an academy for engineering, but he said, tell me what do you think is the way forward? How do we make sure that we seed the engineers who in 10 years' time will become, hopefully, the CTOs of the company who would build the next breakthrough product? So that was a problem statement that I was given. So I'd got basically 2 weeks to figure out this. As soon as the call got over, I got a meeting request in Waldorf, so I know this was real. So I told my assistant, book my flights in, and I had 2 weeks to figure this out. And the only person who I could go to was my assistant, my chief of staff. And so we started asking the fundamental question, who is a great engineer? And we said the way to figure this out is to look back in history and look at the qualities of the great engineers of the past and project it into the future. So we figure out what are the qualities of the best engineers of the future, and then we teach them at the SAP Academy for Engineering. But first, we had to figure out what are the qualities of the great engineers. So we looked at history. And we first asked the question, who is an engineer? What does the word engineer mean? What did the great engineers do? Who are those whom we want to study and find the core characteristics? How many of you know the word engineer comes from, not engine, many people think it's from the word engine, it actually comes from the word ingenious. Ingenious to ingenious. The word ingenious means clever. The second thing we found was who was the first engineer. Let's figure out who was the first engineer. The first engineer was a Greek person whose name was Imhotep. This is as per the Britannica. Imhotep is the first person who was called an engineer because he built the step pyramids. A lot of Greeks worship him as the god of medicine. And I'm like, okay, so he's an engineer, but he's called the god of medicine. Interesting. So we started looking at all the engineers from the past, from Edison to Ada Lovelace. And we said, are there people in the present whom I could speak to who are outstanding engineers? So we said, let's look at the greatest engineer of our times, the one who built the internet. We went and spoke to Windsurf, the father of the internet, one of the two people who built the internet, or called the fathers of the internet, Bob Kahn and Windsurf. And we spent time with him to understand who is a great engineer. After intense research, we found that all the engineers from the past till present had basically shown 5 qualities. All of them, hundreds of years, they just showed 5 outstanding qualities. And let me break that down, 5 qualities to you first. This is the most interesting thing. The first thing we realized is that all of these engineers fell in love with the problem. They never fell in love with the solution. They had this incredible ability to constantly ask good questions. More often than not, they never had the answers. They fell in love with the problem. They had the ability to ask incredibly good questions. Edison was great. He said, I did not fail 10,000 times. I found 10,000 new ways to do the thing until it worked. All these outstanding engineers had this ability to ask profound questions, and they fell in love with the problem. Einstein said it beautifully, if you give me 7 days to solve a problem, I will spend 6 days thinking about it, and then the answer will come to me. In the age of AI, I say the answer is the easy one. It's the question which is the hardest part. That was the first quality. And I told my engineers all the time, don't start coding as soon as you get to know the problem statement. You have to understand the problem statement. All engineers love to code. Give me the problem, I'll start coding. No, wait. Fall in love with the problem before you fall in love with the solution. The first insight. The second insight, and this is incredibly important, is that all of them were first principles thinkers. They always went to the fundamental building block of a problem and worked it upwards. One of the greatest first principles thinkers of our times is Elon Musk. People often ask, how is this guy able to solve every damn problem? You give him a problem to put man on Mars, he'll figure it out. You give him a problem to solve the traffic issues in LA, he will build a tunnel. You ask him to talk about Twitter, I don't know whether he's solving it right, but if you give him a problem, you'll find that he's trying to solve all different problems. But why is he able to solve them? Because he's a first principles thinker. He will always go down to the fundamental levels. He's a curious mind, and then he works upwards to solve the problem. He says, give me any problem, I'll solve it. Because he's a first principles thinker. The third interesting thing we found is that everybody was an outstanding systems thinker. They saw the world as deeply interconnected things. They did not solve for one small part of it. They solved the problem for multiple elements. In the deeply connected world that we live in, the hardest problem to solve is to realize that every problem you are trying to solve in one part of the problem or one part of the box will have consequences in other parts. If you look at social media, we celebrated it immensely when it was launched a few years ago. But it has also become one of the biggest challenges because of the unintended consequences of social media. Great systems thinkers will always think about deeply interconnected things. They are aware of the secondary effects and the tertiary effects of every innovation. They think in systems. That's why the innovations that last forever are brought by people who are systems thinkers. How is it that the internet is relevant in 50 years and is going to be relevant for the next 50 or even more? Because the greatest thinkers are systems thinkers. Windsurf told me how he made the architecture diagram of the internet on a piece of napkin, which is actually still there in Palo Alto. Because he thought in systems. He said the best engineers are systems thinkers. The fourth interesting characteristics we found was they were deeply altruistic. Deeply altruistic. They had a DNA for giving. They never built it for themselves. They always built it for the larger good. They always wanted the world to be a much better place than they inherited. They were deeply altruistic in nature. And last but not the least, probably the most important, was they were all builders. They made things with hands. From the pyramids to the internet, they were all builders. They did things with the hands. I always tell my engineers this. You cannot learn swimming by watching a YouTube video. You just cannot. If you want to know swimming, you have to jump into the water. You can do a lot of learning, but there is no learning without doing. If you want to understand coding, you have to write lines of code. You can't just read it. The best engineers are the ones who learn by doing. Doing has to be the center of everything. If you understand this and overarch all of this with the fundamental premise that you have to fail often before you succeed, you become a good engineer. One of the challenges with our times is that it seems that none of us has ever failed. If you looked at LinkedIn posts, I haven't seen a single LinkedIn post where people say, I screwed it up. Everybody is doing such perfect engineering. They just know it all. It's a lot of bullshit out there. Because the history will tell you, you will never be successful without having failed. And you will, if you never speak about it, you probably are not going to be proud of what you're doing. And I'm very aware of what happens on LinkedIn. We all should be. So we said, if we know these 5 characteristics and project it into the future, this is timeless, by the way. This is timeless. We studied every great engineer, including the current ones, and we said, if these are the characteristics that we want to build in our engineers, we're going to build an academy where we will teach these 5, because all of this can be taught. All of these characteristics can be taught. This is difficult, it will take time, but can be taught. So I went to the CEO and he said, this is what I found out, and we are going to teach these based on some core values. He said, before I started, I said, I need 3 months to transition from my old role to the new one. He said, yes, and he said, start tomorrow. And so on 1st of April, 2019, I was asked to build the SAP Academy for Engineering. I was the first one. From a 1,500 people team, I got to one and said, build this out, and I give you a 10-year runway. Because good things takes time. So we started the academy with some of these premises. One of the core insights we learned was all the great engineers were multidimensional in nature. They were not just good engineers, but they had multiple interests. Some of them were great artists. Da Vinci was a great example. All the people who met, whom we thought as great engineers, were also had a deep interest in humanities. Look at Steve Jobs. He said, magic happens at the intersection of science and humanities. The best engineers need to have a combination of both science and humanities. And so we said, at the academy, we will not just teach them SAP, BTP, and S/4HANA, and all the other things which we need to teach, but we'll actually teach them humanities. And people are like, what? You want to teach humanities? How does that make you a better engineer? And we'll show you evidence of some of that. So when we have the engineers who come to the academy, we ask them 2 projects to complete. Initially, it started as a long program with 6 months. Then COVID happened, so all our plans went off the window. But now we do a month of virtual and a month of in-person at San Ramon. But when they come in, they have to do 2 projects on the final day before they graduate. First, they have to build an application on SAP BTP. Doesn't matter where you come from, but you have to build a project with your team on SAP BT. You have to do a demo in front of executives. The second is you have to perform a theater play in front of the executives. Every group is broken down into a team of 8 to 10, and we say, now you own a theater company, build a production, right from marketing to dialogue writing, to script writing, and then you have to perform in front of a crowd like this. You have to sell the tickets, but it has to be a live performance. We're building both science and humanities, and they have to come together. And the thing we realize we're going to teach is not technology, but curiosity. We said the only thing that is timeless is curiosity. You can teach them Python, you can teach them Java programming, you can teach them AI. That will change every year. While we will teach them that, what we really teach them is how to have a curious mind. Curiosity is timeless. If you can teach people to be curious, you don't have to train them on anything because they have a curious mind. And so we ask this fundamental final question: what is the persona of an engineer? If I have to build the persona of an engineer and represent it in one simple diagram, what would that be? A few years ago when I joined SAP, they said the best engineers whom we want to hire have to be T-shaped, which means they have to have broad domain knowledge and deep technical knowledge. And you can pick any domain, you can pick any language, but they are all T-shaped. So when I was hiring, I used to give people the choice. Hire people who are T-shaped. That I met this incredible professor at Stanford, Ge Wang, who's also one of the founders of the app called Smule. How many of you know Smule? It's a music app. He's actually a computer scientist, but also a musician. He's the founder of something fascinating called the Stanford Orchestra, Laptop Orchestra, where he has 8 of his students doing performance on the laptop. He's a musician and a computer scientist at the same time. He said, Ferose, the best engineers are not T-shaped, they are pie-shaped. And I'm like, what is a pie-shaped? He said, the pie-shaped engineers, the 2 legs of the pie is the domain knowledge and the discipline knowledge. What do I mean by that? A domain knowledge is you could be an expert in retail, you could be an expert in healthcare. The discipline is computer science, it could be music, it could be any of that. So you need 2 of the legs, domain expertise and disciplinary expertise. But the most important thing is what is on top of the pie. And he said, that's the artistic lens. That's the context. The best engineers understand the context that we live in. And he said, the best engineers of the future, or even the present, are the ones who are pie-shaped. They have a sense of beauty. They see the lens from the world of beauty. And he said, figure those engineers, build them out, and they will be the best engineers of the future. So we've been running this program at the SAP Academy for Engineering. We, of course, are extremely selective of who gets in. Sometimes I say it's harder to get into the academy than to get into SAP. We've restricted it only to the top 1%, to the best of the company, the catalysts. They go through an intense program. When they come in, we ask them to do 2 things. On day 1, we ask them to write their failure resume. And they said, Ferose, what is a failure resume? I said, write down all the things that you failed in life. And one guy came and said, Ferose, I've never failed. I said, you're not going too far. And I role model it. So I read my failure resume to everybody because I want to give them the permission to fail. If I can fail, it's okay for you to fail. We make failing okay. And there's enough evidence to show that the longer the failure resume, the higher the chance of success, because at least this guy is trying something new. And the second thing is, as soon as we ask them to do the theater, they hate me for it. People come with very tough reactions. They're like, really? Theater? Well, like, I'm an engineer. Just leave me alone. Let me code. That's all I want to do, Ferose. I don't want to do this theater shit. When they graduate, they say, this was a life-changing moment. This is the one thing that has changed my life. Because I go back to what Steve Jobs said, that the only relevant person in the world is a storyteller. It doesn't matter which field you are in. If you're not able to tell a story, you're not going too far. And so what we want to do is not just make them great engineers, we want to make them great storytellers. And everybody has a story. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer or an architect or a leader, you have to be a storyteller. And in the last few years, we've graduated around 800 of them from the academy. This was kind of a submarine project. We didn't tell too many people, but then I got a call from Christian Klein again. He said, Ferose, he's a sponsor for MENA region, Middle East. He's been going there, and he said, Ferose, customers are having the same problem as we have. So I'm going to ask the customers to sell their best engineers to the academy. So here I am. We've just hosted 2 cohorts of around 20 different customers, and they send the best engineers to the academy to build them the next generation of engineers. As I said, allow me to show the slide because to respect my assistant who put in a lot of work. But I'll end with a quick video of what we actually do at the academy. It's a quick video. I hope you like the video. And then I will take on Paul because he promised me that he's going to do the next Enterprise Architecture Forum at the SAP Academy for Engineering. So I'll quickly go through the slides. And hold on your claps for now. Can I quickly go through the slides, please? Yes, so this is what the future engineer looks like. What we feel is, what are the key characteristics of the future engineer? I'm an engineer, my father was an engineer, my brother was an engineer, we all did engineering, so we do know a little bit about engineering. The word comes from ingenious. The other important characteristic that I want to tell you is about a long-term mindset. And I learned this from Stewart Brand, one of the icons of Silicon Valley. He said, the best thinkers are long-term thinkers. They're not short-term thinkers. And he did something fascinating. He runs an organization called the Long Now Foundation, where they teach how to talk about long-term thinking. He's just built a clock which will last the next 10,000 years. It is built inside a mountain, absolutely fascinating, a mechanical clock which will last the next 10,000 years. And the reason to build the clock was not to tell them, okay, here is something that we built which will last the test of time, but really to force us to think long term. I think one of the challenges we face here is that everybody is short-term thinking. He said, the best engineers are long-term thinkers. What are the common characteristics we find? So we've studied all of them. Vint is now an advisor to the SAP Academy for Engineering. That's Vint Cerf. He's the father of the internet. He won the Turing Award, which is the Nobel Prize for computer science. These are some of the characteristics we found. Craftsmanship. We say it's not coding, it's craftsmanship. Craftsmanship is doing something with the hand. Altruism, grit, problem solving, ingenuity. These are the two people whom we spent a lot of time with trying to understand the persona of an engineer. And we found that this is what we think is the engineer of the future. These are the values that we imbibe. Curiosity is one of the most important values that we teach at the Academy. And what he said, that actually the engineer of the future is no different from the engineer of the past. This is a quote from Vint Cerf. It's the same thing. If you go to first principles thinking, it's the same. And let me conclude with this slide. This is the most important slide for me. One of the biggest flaws of engineering is the following. Every profession with no exception, when you graduate, you have to make a commitment about what are you going to use your skills for. If you're a doctor, you take a pledge that I'm going to be in service of the patient. If you're a lawyer, you say I'm going to be in service of the client. If you become the president, you say I'm in service of the country. But if you are an engineer, you can do whatever shit you want. I'm an engineer. I never took a pledge. And so at the SAP Academy for Engineering, every graduate has to take a pledge which says, I'm going to use my skills to make the world a better place. Thank you very much. Give me 4 more minutes. I don't know how I'm doing on time, but this is absolutely important because I want to tell you this is not just a lecture here. We are actually doing this at the Academy. And I want to give you a quick glimpse of the customer cohort. We wanted to test it with a cohort which is the most difficult. So we got the customers from Saudi Arabia where, we were like, Saudi Arabia, the men and women don't talk. And if you ask them to do theater together, they're like, sorry, they want to sit separately. But we tried it out, and here is the result. Play the video, please.
What is the future engineer? The engineer of the future is no different from the engineer of the past. The greatest engineers had an incredible amount of perseverance. They would never give up. And look at the core DNA of all these great engineers and project it into the future. Then we will build those at the SAP Academy for Engineering.
Why is it that some people, in the face of the most challenging circumstances, still find the clarity, the courage, and the strength, and will actually take that adversity and convert it into a net positive?
And we want to make sure that the next 4 weeks is going to be the best experience of your life. All I need is your active participation.
the first impression, the space is actually amazing. The offices, the arena, everything, it actually stimulates my desire to learn and learn more. I'm really impressed.
The instructors were really welcoming, really accepting. It feels like I belong here in a way.
Everyone is so excited and they want to start right now.
The agenda for this day will include the introduction, problem and solution, workflow and assumptions, future scope, and last but not least, the demo.
How we allocated our time with 34% of genius, 10% relaxing. Okay, this is not true, it was a bit more than that.
Yeah, you kept me engaged. As you talk, I can watch the mood of the team, which I thought was a really nice touch.
This was such an enjoyable presentation. I like that the problem statement was short, snappy. I picked up what you were going to do immediately.
Why is it that you do what you do? This is so much more important than what you do or how you do it. And what is the legacy that you want to leave?
What we're going to look at today are some simple ways you can maximize connections in your life and minimize crashes.
What you're going to teach here is the ability to think independently, the ability to keep trying, the ability to overcome failures, but to be grounded on a strong moral value. All of you should take notes, because this is not entertainment, this is learning.
I was a completely different person before I joined the program. And now, look at me giving a speech in front of an audience. That was really major for me, transformational.
We developed this bond with each other. I really enjoyed every moment of being here in the SAP Academy.
Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the most beautiful of all? It's you, my dear Miriam. So lovely and fair. No doubt your beauty beyond compare.
Day by day, when you have to come on time, when you have to meet people, when you have to practice, cooperate with everyone, it really hits that this is what we actually do in life.
It was beyond my expectations. Take full advantage of this.
Let's do this together. And actually that's work. And this is really amazing.
Our methodologies go where the talent is. And I think the talent from Saudi Arabia already proven itself to be the highest level.
I might not be a software engineer, but I want to sign up for this academy.
We are not defined by our external successes and failures. Instead, we're defined by our values. It is even more important to look internally to who we are and to what we stand for. When you live by your values, the outcomes will naturally follow.
All the great engineers in history built it not for themselves. They wanted to build something for the world to be a better place. So do not underestimate the power of a few people who made a commitment to their consciousness that what I'm going to do is the right thing. Once all of this can be taught, you all can be unleashed to the world to become some of the best engineers the world has ever seen.
So I have a few questions for Ferose as we sort of finish up, but maybe imagine, what if we have an SAP Academy for Enterprise Architects? What if maybe that's a teaser video for a future academy coming in fall of 2024? That's sort of some of the things Ferose and I have been talking about as well. So, and what you've been exposed to the last few days is a bit of a teaser, foreshadowing in essence, of what we're working on constructing. So we've been trying to build in elements of the program the last little while that aren't the full program, but emulate some of it. And there's one key element, one thing that really stuck with me when I visited the academy was things the engineers are learning. And the thing that most stuck in my mind is the content stack. And the content stack that just wasn't S4 BTP. Can you tell us a little bit about the content stack, Ferose?
Yeah.
That really stuck in my head as we constructed this.
And that's funny because as soon as he came to the academy, he said, Ferose, I love the content stack, and can you share that with me? So I actually put it out here. So this is a content stack. This is what we teach at the academy. And the most important thing is the first 4 hours of the day is actually classroom learning, and the next 4 hours is hands-on work. So, they have to work on actually building it out, writing the code, or actually practicing for their theater. So the days are broken into half, and this is what we actually go through it. So the technology stack includes all the things that you would expect, right? We teach them even gaming. It's not that SAP is in the gaming business, but gaming is about your imagination. So we get some of the best gaming people and ask them, how do you teach them to draw stuff and trigger their imagination? So you have gaming, machine learning, AI, cybersecurity, of course, BTP, Analytics Cloud, S4, SuccessFactors, all the products. They get an overview of all the products. And this is the one that they love the most, which is the cross-cultural intelligence, purpose-driven leadership, storytelling, communication, personality assessment. Most people say, no, I never did a personality assessment before. So this is the first time I really know who I am. Journaling and reflection, every day starts with journaling. We think that if you do that for 30 days, it becomes a muscle memory. People ask me, how do you write so prolifically? I said, I was always journaling, which is I don't have to publish for the world, but I write for myself. I think Paul does that as well. But that's a muscle memory that can be taught. But if you do that for 30 days every day, just one paragraph of your thoughts and reflections, it becomes a habit. So that's actually the content stack, Paul, for you.
Great. And by the way, just quickly for this group, we're going to try to do some things even virtually as well to help you get better at storytelling as well. So stay tuned for some interesting things on that. So lastly, in closing, you talk about future engineer. What about the future enterprise architect?
Good question. So, I've been sitting through some of the sessions because I was like, what are these? I mean, I, of course, know who an architect is. I have a lot of technology architects in my team, some of the best chief architects I had worked with. But I really wanted to understand what is the characteristics just by listening to everybody. And I found that there are two things which stood out for me, and I'll put it this way. The first is the ability, what I call as taming complexity. A good enterprise architect knows how to tame complexity. Because when I look at all the slides, there are so many boxes, it confused the hell out of me. But I think a good architect would be able to explain that and bring down the complexity radically. That's the first. The second thing, which I wish I'd heard more, is that instead of just talking about architecting systems, we should also speak about architecting humans. And I'll go back to what Rishad said on the first day. AI is no longer a differentiator. And more often than not, I've done multiple large-scale transformations. It's always the humans that come in the way. You can build a perfect strategy, and it'll never work. So I think we need to speak a little bit about architecting the humans, and that would actually, coming together, would be the best enterprise architect.
Oh, just one more thing. You're actually going to be 50 in April, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make that clarification. And actually, he was wrong. I'll be 64 in October. So I think the Beatles song, Will You Still Need Me When I'm 64?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ferose.
Thank you.
Miles?